I have to admit, I think that the guy is probably on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I think that he may need some therapy for his own purposes. Allow the European Union effectively to become non-viable and a clear and present danger for humanity.
Yanis Varoufakis states a clear fact. Europe is becoming a vassal continent to a new form of power he calls cloud capital. He explains how figures like Musk and Bezos are not just billionaires, but the new techno-feudal lords, and why Europe's political crisis makes it unable to resist. To grasp the new global hierarchy, make sure you follow our analysis.
We need to separate Musk's reasons for doing what he's doing, which I don't understand. I have to admit. I think that the guy is probably on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I think that he may need some therapy for his own purposes. If you remember the great movie Citizen Kane, when Kane starts losing it, and he wants to be not only the great distributor of news, but he also wants to be president. He wants to be senator, whatever it is, and he wants to. The only thing he didn't want to become at some point was archbishop, or the pope. So there is paranoia. But I don't care what. I'm not in the business of minding Musk's soul. But the point you are raising, Marin, is central. It's the reason why DiEM25 exists, because Europe is bunk. We created DiEM25 because in 2015, 2016, it became absolutely obvious, evident, self-evident that it is a faulty political and economic design, especially after we created the common currency. We have effectively created the circumstances that will maximize the magnitude and depth of economic crisis, of social crisis, of political crisis, while at the same time removing all the shock absorbers, the social programs and the social support programs that would ameliorate these crises. So and the result is, we were saying, remember, back in 2015, 2016, that Europe will either democratize or by 2025, and thus the 25 in DiEM25, this whole thing called the European Union is going to start disintegrating with immense political, social, ethical, of course, technological costs. And this is what is happening. So, in Europe now, there's no government in Germany, there's no government in France. The Austrian government has just not even convened. Holland has a government which they can't be proud of, with the Geert Wilders party effectively having the prime ministership. Italy is in the hands of a neo-fascist. The greatest hope of the liberal establishment, Emmanuel Macron, is effectively a lame duck facing an early retirement. And the most interesting thing is that the greatest, if you want, organizational mind in Europe from the establishment point of view, Mario Draghi, the former head of the European Central Bank and former Italian Prime Minister, who came out with a proposal which is interesting. I mean, at least it's a sensible, rational, bourgeois, liberal proposal for what needs to be done in Europe, that he was paid millions in order to produce by European taxpayers. He tabled that proposal a few months ago, and it's already in the dustbin. It's already been confined to the dustbin of history by the leaders of Europe. So that I think explains why any Musk around the world, any sort of deranged ultra-rightist with a smidgen of power can poke fun at the Europeans, and can I mean, it is absurd that it is an issue that Musk wrote an op-ed in Die Welt. Who cares? And the only reason why we care is because we feel so insecure as a result of having allowed the European Union effectively to become non-viable and a clear and present danger for humanity, not just for Europeans. But we are the stupid continent that is going to play a very significant role in destabilizing the globe. So good to be hearing and listening to Corey, because so far, for a while now, we've been reading each other's books, we have been endorsing each other, promoting each other's books. It's very good to actually be, even if it's only in 2 dimensions, through the medium of cloud capital. It's great, Corey, to be on the same timeline and, not just exchanging text messages. Look, the only reason why we're talking about Elon Musk and not Jeff Bezos or Zuckerberg presently is because he has become the de facto vice president of the United States. He purchased a very cushy position in the administration. It was an amazing and astonishing investment, for a couple of $100 million. He's made a couple of $100 billion, actually more. I don't think there is a better return to one's dollar than what he has already achieved. Okay, so this is why we're talking about him. I personally don't care at all if he writes an op-ed in Die Welt about his support of the AfD. I believe in free speech. If he wants to support the poor excuses for human nature in the German elections, let him do it. I don't think this is what is worrying. It's not just him, of course. There is a gentleman that you all know, Peter Thiel, that he has also ingratiated himself. These people who have joined the Trump campaign relatively early on. Peter Thiel supplied the actual vice president, right? It was a former employee of Peter Thiel. All these things are perfectly legitimate reasons to feel sick in the stomach. When you have men, the oligarchy of tremendous wealth with a very sordid history. Don't forget the way that they've been treating the mothers of their children, trying to impoverish them through the courts, the way they've been endorsing books that are justifying torture and laugh at the notion of human rights. The zillions that they are making from government and military, in particular procurement, the manner in which they are targeting any government program which doesn't enrich them, but it does something little in order to assist the poor. This is all nauseating stuff. More recently, we saw Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, visiting Miami and having a little tete-a-tete with Elon Musk. And I can tell you that one of the reasons why Elon Musk is so enamored of her and doesn't want her to be deposed, unlike Nigel Farage, that for some reason suddenly he's in his bad books. He wants, instead of giving him £100 million, he wants to depose him from the leadership of the Reform UK party. Well, the reason is that Meloni has effectively offered him the opportunity of having the Italian state move away from IRIS-2, the satellite network that the European Union was planning to create in competition with Starlink. And that is a reason to be extremely worried when you have such deals being concocted in Mar-a-Lago between the Italian neo-fascist prime minister and Elon Musk. I don't need to add any adjectives to him. But having said all that, and let me just add one more thing. He's not a free speech absolutist. He's an absolutist. He's a totalitarian. But I don't think he cares about free speech unless it is his own free speech. He supposedly he's supporting Tommy Robinson's free speech, and the fact that Tommy Robinson is in prison for contempt of court, for actually lying about a Syrian refugee, in court and outside of court. But when Julian Assange was rotting in the Belmarsh high security prison, Elon Musk said not one word, because for him, a man who is convicted of nothing should rot in prison if he does against the interests of the CIA, of the NSA, of the Pentagon, and of Elon Musk. So give it a rest, Elon. You don't give a damn about freedom of speech and freedom of expression, especially for the free press. But the point of Now I'm going to play, to some extent, devil's advocate in actually arguing that there isn't. We need to ask ourselves what is really new about this, because many people are pretending that what is happening with Musk, with Thiel, and with the other members of the brotherhood of the oligarchy, that this is something really new. Well, is it? Is it really new? I mean, yes, but not for the reasons that most journalists of the liberal establishment press tell us. John D. Rockefeller, he headed a dynasty that makes Musk look an amateur. Henry Ford, he bought newspapers and canvassed and effectively forced municipalities to rip out tramways and to replace them with Ford automobiles and buses. Thomas Edison electrocuted famously an elephant at Coney Island just to demonstrate that Westinghouse's direct current electricity was dangerous, whereas alternating current was dangerous, whereas Edison's direct current wasn't. Big business has always enjoyed a revolving door kind of relationship with government. Remember that Bill Clinton appointed Rubin, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, to the Treasury as his Treasury Finance Minister, in order effectively to remove all and every shackle that was since the 1930s holding back Goldman Sachs from doing effectively committing the crimes that they committed immediately after the Clinton administration allowed them to do this. And then Obama brings the same person back in order to bail out the same banks after the 2008 collapse that these bankers had created. So we have to keep all this in mind. But here's how I'm going to complete this long thought. There is one thing which is new, and that is the new form of capital that these people actually possess. Tori knows that I call it cloud capital. It's not a produced means of production, it's a produced means of behavioral modification. And that gives them, it's effectively a new hyper weapon, which these broligarchs, these cloudalists as I call them, or techno-feudal barons or lords, they possess, which, a Henry Ford, a Thomas Edison, a Westinghouse, a Rockefeller didn't. And unless we understand the manner in which this new form of capital, which I call cloud capital, operates, and the way that it usurps markets, it replaces them, it replaces profit with rent, it effectively turns capital, cloud capital, into a gigantic parasite, which is 100 times, a million times bigger than the organism on which it is parasitic. The organism is traditional capitalism, and of course the labor force, and of course the surplus value that these workers produce. We need to understand that, because this new hyper weapon of the lords of big tech, of the Musks of the world, not just Musk, Gates, Google, don't forget them, right? Even though they are Democrats, they've always been in this game, and they're already in the inner circle of Trump, or they will be very soon. It is important to home in on the political economy of the phenomenon of which Musk is simply an epiphenomenon. Yes, absolutely. But first, let me also say that you see, Musk has succeeded in making us talk about him. And not talk about Jeff Bezos, who is a far more scary figure for me, and a greater menace to the world. And not just him, right? But Thiel, Google, and so on. Zuckerberg, what happened? Have we forgotten about Zuckerberg and Cambridge Analytica and Facebook and all that? And Instagram. So he succeeded. And one of the reasons why he bought Twitter was because he didn't have that much cloud capital. His enterprises were cutting edge, SpaceX and Tesla and so on, but they were very old fashioned. They were producing all type of terrestrial capital, even if some of it went up in space. Let me now answer our viewers' point, which I think goes to the heart of it. And it also connects with another question that we had in the chat on YouTube. Is it any different to a monopoly? Is this different to standard monopoly capitalism? Why can't we regulate big tech in the way that Teddy Roosevelt regulated and broke up Standard Oil and Rockefeller's enterprises? There is a difference, and the difference is that from where I'm standing, take Amazon for instance. It's not a monopoly, folks. It's not even a marketplace. It is a trading platform on which you will find, hundreds of thousands at every moment in time of buyers and sellers. But it is not a market, because a market requires a degree of decentralization, even a monopoly. Imagine you go into a shopping mall which is owned by one person, and that person owns all the shops, controls everything that is there, the advertising, everything. At least you and I, you, Corey, me, Maron, we can walk around together and we can actually talk about it. We can even organize a little consumer boycott between the three of us, saying we're not going to buy from that bastard who owns the shopping mall, right? But when you're in Amazon, you can't talk to one another. Every communication, every sale, every offer, every post is regulated by a centrally planned algorithm that belongs to Jeff Bezos. So essentially, this is not a market. It's a trading place which is controlled, which, as I've written before, and Corey knows that I like to make this point, it is the wet dream of the Soviet planners, of Gosplan, of the Ministry of Economic Planning. Because what was the Ministry of Economic Planning, Gosplan, trying to do under the Soviet Union, especially after 1936? They were trying to replace the market, especially after they got rid of the new economic policy of Lenin and so on. They wanted to replace the market with a bureaucratic system, a cybernetic kind of algorithmic process by which to match individual consumers with individual producers, or with factories, or with farmers. And saying to the factory that made shoes, we want so many shoes, color black, these sizes, at these prices. And then match these shoes with the demand from the consumers. Okay, to replace the market. Now, this is exactly what the algorithm of Amazon does. The difference is that under the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, at least there was some pretense that this was done for the purposes of maximizing social welfare. Whereas in the case of Amazon, it's not even a secret. The algorithm is optimized for one purpose: to maximize the likelihood that Jeff Bezos will extract the maximum rent from each transaction and the maximum amount of free labor from each one of us who posts and reviews and does stuff on Amazon.com. Right? So this is not a monopoly. I call it a cloud fiefdom. You can call it a digital fiefdom, or a digital platform which is feudal in nature, because this guy doesn't produce anything of the stuff that you buy on Amazon. He simply charges a rent for every economic activity that's happening on that. I call it a cloud rent in order to distinguish it from a ground rent. Of course, a cloud rent, unlike in feudalism, requires, in order to materialize, it requires a lot of capital, but it's a cloud capital form. It is of the algorithm type which modifies what we do. It doesn't. Corey is right. They will never succeed. Thankfully, they will never succeed in brainwashing us, in making me want to buy, a coffee machine if I don't like coffee. They will never be able to do that. But they can modify my behavior regarding my priorities. If I want to buy an electric bicycle, I may buy it much, much earlier than I would have, and I will buy it from a vendor that the algorithm chooses for me for the purpose of maximizing the cloud rent of Jeff Bezos. Now, that is a unique power, and one that you cannot regulate in a way that the Teddy Roosevelt administration utilized in order to regulate. So we need something very, very different here, unless we find ways of socializing the algorithm and changing property rights of the algorithm. I don't believe we can do very much in the standard New Deal social democratic European manner. Never lobby the EU ever again. I think it's a lost cause. I have a very sorry and long experience of that. I think they are a lost cause. To plug your book. Corey.
Oh, yeah.
Lost Cause. A great sci-fi.
Yeah.
You should read it, folks.
I have a copy of that around here somewhere.
There you are. Along with, what was it, Radicalized, which was a very prescient novel regarding the killing of what's his name? The health private insurance executive. Anyway, look.
The sociopath.
Just plugging a couple of books by Corey.
Well, thank you.
Brilliant books, Corey. Well done.
Thank
Because, Corey is not just a political economist and theorist of the internet and acidification and all that, but, he's a great novelist as well. And he keeps writing,
That's really kind of you. Thank you,
Keep
Yanis.
churning them out. I've only produced one, and I don't think I will produce them. But anyway.
This one comes out on February 15th. And yeah, this is the third Martin Hench book, and there's a Kickstarter to pre-order it right now. It's from Macmillan, but these Kickstarters are really helpful. I launched it about an hour ago, maybe 2 hours now, and it is, where is it sitting at? I think about $30,000. So it's doing quite well. I can paste the URL into the chat here.
We'll put it on our site. But let me now slightly disagree with you about Europe in particular. Before disagreeing, I will agree that we need to be very hopeful on the prospects of what I call techno-rebellions, of using technologies in the ways that you have already outlined in order to counter the exorbitant power of what I call cloud capital. There's no doubt about that. And it's already happening in Africa, it's already happening in various places in the United States, but it's only the very beginning. We cannot be triumphalists about that because it's only tiny little chinks in the armor of big tech. On the question of Europe, you will allow me to say that, yes, I see your point, that Brussels should go all out against Silicon Valley. Because we didn't do in Europe what the Chinese did. The Chinese erected a huge Chinese wall and they created their own. We don't have our own. We have zero European cloud capital. Even the cloud capital that emerges in Europe very quickly becomes Americanized, like Vault, for instance. It is gobbled up by Silicon Valley. So they could. They have the knowledge. They have the bureaucracy, the bureaucrats. They have the lawyers. They have the legal power to make a serious dent in the armor of Silicon Valley. But they don't do it. I was just looking at the numbers. Amazon made 55 billion euros revenues last year in 2024 across the European Union. It paid zero tax, precisely zero tax through the Dutch double sandwich with Ireland and Caribbean islands and so on. So they could have put an end to that. There's no doubt that some of the people in Brussels wanted to put an end to that. Margrethe Vestager, whom you mentioned before, tried to put an end to that. She lost every single case in the European courts. Every single case she has lost. And the money that has been extracted from Apple, the 16 billion, which the Irish government did not want to take, they were forced to take, has already been set aside, I don't know whether you know that, not in order to build housing for the homeless in Ireland, and Ireland is a very rich country these days because of big tech, because of the tax breaks and so on. But it has a very serious social crisis, social care crisis, housing crisis, and so on. Instead of using that money that they were forced to take by the European Union, they are setting it aside in order to create electricity generation capacities for the big tech, on behalf of big tech. So that is a absolute catastrophe in Europe, but more broadly, Corey, allow me to say that if you don't own your own cloud capital, you're doomed. Your powers to enforce and to regulate will wane. And don't forget that, yes, there is this is what we are trying to do as DiEM25. We're trying to harvest the anger, the rage of Europeans against this kind of peasantry in which they have been reduced to by Silicon Valley. We try to utilize it in order we try to give it creative ways of expressing itself through policy, through serious thinking, not through just blatant anger. But at the very same time, there is a very large, silent, idiotic majority out there in Europe, let's be honest about that, who don't give a damn. For whom it is for whom Google is like the air they breathe. And if you say anything to them about regulating Google, they say they will go and fight on Google's side. We must not forget. Interoperability. You mentioned interoperability a number of times, and of course, you've done a lot of great work on that. And you told me that it was before I went to China a few months ago, and I checked that you were right, that the Chinese are imposing interoperability. The Europeans could impose interoperability, and they're not doing it, and they will never do it. Because you know what? Well, there is no way they would do it. Zero probability. I mean, these people, the ones representing the balance of power in the European Parliament today, because they are utterly in the pocket of Wall Street on the one hand, and Silicon Valley on the other. They simply do not have the capacity. Let me put it this way. One of the great powers of cloud capital is that it can poison the conversation. And this is something that Elon Musk tries to do single-handedly, going back to our original theme today of that particular gentleman, right? And once you poison the conversation, you can't really create a political discourse which is necessary to underpin the legislative work that is necessary in order to introduce interoperability. And, I'm becoming, even though I am libertarian to my bone, as a libertarian Marxist, to confuse people, to my bone, without creating a protective shield within which to grow your own publicly owned cloud capital, unless you can do that, and therefore create an alternative Facebook, an alternative X, an alternative Uber for that matter, that is owned by the municipality and combines Airbnb and Uber, but in a way that the algorithm is primed in favor of the well-being of the people who live there, not in favor of the owners, the private equity that owns Uber or Airbnb. Unless you do that, your powers to regulate will wane or will never be used. Well, it's been a delight sharing this platform with Cory. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you to everyone who has been watching. I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you, Cory. Margrethe Vestager, whom you obviously appreciate, she's been fired.
I know.
And she's been fired at the behest of big tech. And the gentleman that has replaced her is also there at the behest of big tech in order not to continue, anything that annoys them. So, anyway, let me make the point that just answer the question of, or actually giving an example of what we can do. As Cory said, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why we have an urgent need for democratic politics is that on the basis of voluntarism and individual action, nothing is going to change. No progressive move is going to be completed, even if it is attempted. This is not a question of scratching each other's backs and doing things to ameliorate our personal ego or the pain that we feel for living in a world that is grossly irrational and wastes so many opportunities that we have as humanity. This is why we need democratic politics, right? And an example of that, which in a way combines traditional forms of political action, of trade union activity with big tech, and a large and very necessary dose of transnationalism or internationalism, is the campaign of the Progressive International, #MakeAmazonPay. It's been running now for a few years. It is a pilot program. The idea of Make Amazon Pay was initially to try to create a rolling strike which is transnational and aims at one of these big tech companies, in this particular case, Amazon. It starts with the first light of day during Black Friday in warehouses in Vietnam, and then moves to Bangladesh, to India, to Germany, to New Jersey, and finishes off in Seattle. If we manage to combine these rolling strikes of Amazon workers with a campaign of solidarity, like, for instance, don't visit Amazon.com at all for one day, which is no skin of your nose, literally and metaphorically, and then use this as a pilot scheme for rolling strikes and combined strikes against big tech targets in combination with particular demands on our lawmakers for changing the rules under which these companies can extract so much value without actually producing anything except the power by which to extract those rents from us. That, I think, is a good way of ending the night by providing an example of what can be done as opposed to hopelessness.
Yanis Varoufakis argues that big tech's cloud capital has created a new techno-feudalism, replacing markets with private digital fiefdoms. He suggests traditional regulation is now obsolete. What are your thoughts on this powerful analysis? Share your perspective in the comments. If these deep dives are valuable to you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.